Today's lesson is ancient houses in high places. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And my name is Helen.
Today we are traveling to the United States, and we're going to go to a place called Mesa Verde National Park. Now, that's in Colorado, and it's kind of an ancient site where native people used to live. And Helen, have you ever been to Mesa Verde before?
No, unfortunately, I have never been there, but it's on my bucket list because the southwest of the United States is really beautiful, and there are so many places to see, a lot of historic, natural environments, so it's definitely something that everyone should go try and see.
Indeed, and I've fortunately been to this place twice. I was there on a family trip when I was very small, maybe about 7 or 8 years old, and then I went there recently with my wife and daughter a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, of course. So, of course, this place is pretty fascinating, and I'm glad I went. And if you happen to be in that part of the world, then you should definitely check this place out, Mesa Verde National Park. So let's get to it. Let's read the first part of our lesson, and then we'll come back to talk about it.
Ancient houses in high places. Mesa Verde National Park, located in the U.S. state of Colorado, is an area of wonderful natural beauty, full of deep canyons and thick forests. From the top of the mesa, mesa means table in Spanish and refers to a flat-topped hill, the view across the wild landscape is jaw-dropping. But an even more amazing sight is hidden from view. Just beneath the mesa's rim are more than 600 ancient cliff dwellings built right into the rock face.
大家好，第一部分我们看到名词 dwelling 指住所或是住宅。举例来说 There were dwellings in the forest where people lived hundreds of years ago. 森林里有好几个数百年前人们居住的住所。或是 The family lived in a dwelling that was underground. 这个家庭过去住在一个地底下的住宅。另外，把这个字的字尾 ing 去掉，就变成动词 dwell。表示住或是居住。我们可以说 The old man dwells in a small house on top of a hill. 那位老先生住在山丘顶上的小屋。或者 The villagers dwell in simple cabins that are made out of wood. 这些村民住在简易的木造小屋里。
So diving right into the first part of our lesson, the first sentence says, Mesa Verde National Park, located in the U.S. state of Colorado, is an area of wonderful natural beauty, full of deep canyons and thick forests. So the first line here describes the basic look, the appearance of this national park, which is located in the U.S. state of Colorado. Colorado is a state in the United States. And this area is wonderful, it's beautiful, and it's full of deep canyons and thick forests. So it has a little bit of everything. It has forests, trees, and canyons, which are big holes, kind of like craters in the ground.
Right, and of course, it's kind of far away from any big cities, so if you want to go there, you probably have to rent a car or join some kind of travel group. But in any case, it has wonderful natural beauty. It has deep canyons there and thick forests. And from the top of the mesa, mesa means table in Spanish and refers to a flat-topped hill, the view across the wild landscape is jaw-dropping. So, of course, here we're defining the word mesa in the middle of this sentence here. From the top of the mesa, the view across the wild landscape is jaw-dropping. So since we mentioned the word mesa in the middle of the sentence, we've got to stop and define it for you. What the heck is a mesa? Well, mesa means table in Spanish, and that refers to a flat-topped hill. In the American West and perhaps in Western Canada, there are lots of mountains that are like this. They're mountains, but they have a flat top, hence they're called a mesa or a tabletop mountain.
And you can use the phrase refer to when you want to say it means, or if you want to describe something, to say that something is about something else. So, for instance, I could say the word software refers to the programs that make your computer work. And in this case, the Spanish word mesa refers to a flat-topped hill.
Indeed, and when I was in high school, of course, I had a nickname, the Spider, so I could say, well, my name is Roger, but I'm referred to as the Spider. Okay, so in any case here, this term mesa refers to table, and it refers to a flat-topped hill, and of course, we're describing the view as being jaw-dropping, just like breathtaking. This is jaw-dropping. It makes the bottom of your mouth fall down because you go, wow, that is so cool.
But an even more amazing sight is hidden from view. Just beneath the mesa's rim are more than 600 ancient cliff dwellings built right into the rock face. So aside from the jaw-dropping mesa that you will see there's another amazing sight that you won't be able to see right away because it's hidden from view. And these are the dwellings or the ancient houses that were built right into the face of the rock. And these houses are located right beneath the mesa's rim. So rim here refers to the edge of something. And it usually refers to the edge of something that is round or curved. And in this case, we have something that isn't completely angular. It could be rounded. So we refer to the edge of the mesa as the rim of the mesa.
If you're also in the state of Arizona, you might visit the Grand Canyon, and there are two places where you can go to see the canyon from the north rim and the south rim. So the rim there is the edge of the Grand Canyon on both sides there, the north side or the south side. And here at Mesa Verde, we've got the rim, and just beneath the mesa's rim or the edge of the mesa are more than 600 ancient cliff dwellings. A dwelling, of course, is a place where someone lives. It's a general term. You could refer to your house as your dwelling, but it would be more of an official term.
Right. So these dwellings are built into the rock face, so they are hidden from immediate view, but they are incredibly beautiful. They are jaw-dropping once you are able to see them.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our explanation for today. Let's move on now to the second part and listen. Be careful because it is a little long.
These dwellings were built from stone, mortar, and plaster by a Native American group known today as the Ancestral Pueblo people, who lived in the area for more than 7 centuries, from roughly AD 550 onward. For hundreds of years, the Ancestral Pueblo people lived on top of the mesa where they farmed beans and corn. But then, during the late 1100s, they began building houses on the natural ledges in the canyon walls. This placement was strategic, as the walls offered them shelter from bad weather and protection from enemies. Though many of these cliff dwellings have just 1 or 2 rooms, the area also contains some very large and impressive structures. One of these is the Cliff Palace, which contains 150 rooms and 23 kivas, or round underground rooms used to hold ceremonies and meetings. Recent studies have shown that approximately 100 people might have lived in the complex. Today, visitors can still see traces of these people in the decorations they left, hand marks above the doors, and animal figures painted onto the walls.
"第二部分我们看到单字 onward， 这个字是副词，指向前的或是前进的，字尾 ward 表示向点点点的。例如 From the 19th century onward, humankind has seen unprecedented technological advancements. 自19世纪以来，人类见证了前所未有的科技进展。再来我们看到单字 ledge， 这个字是名词，指岩架或是壁架。像是 It always scares us when Walter takes selfies so close to steep ledges. 当 Walter 离岩架很近自拍时，总是让我们胆战心惊。也可以说 The ledge is not stable, so don't lean against it. 这个壁架不怎么牢固，所以不要靠在它上面。最后我们看到单字 approximately， 这个字是副词，指大约或是大概。举例来说 It takes approximately 3 hours to drive to Chicago, depending on the traffic. 开车到芝加哥大约要花3个小时，视交通状况而定。或者 There were approximately 5,000 people in the crowd, according to the police. 根据警察所说，人群中大约有5000人。
So let's look a little bit more at these cliff dwellings. Now, these dwellings were built from stone, mortar, and plaster by a Native American group known today as the ancestral Pueblo people who lived in the area for more than 7 centuries from roughly AD 550 or AD 550 onward. So one thing that we know about these ancient dwellings is that they were built by a group of people, Native Americans. Native Americans are Americans who lived in America before the Europeans arrived and settled there. So they are referred to as Native Americans. And Native Americans are made up of various groups or tribes. And in this case, it's the ancestral Pueblo people who were responsible for making these dwellings.
Exactly. And of course, these dwellings were built from various things, stone, mortar, and plaster. Mortar is the sticky stuff between bricks, and plaster is kind of put on the walls. And of course, these people were known as the ancestral Pueblo people who lived in the area for more than 7 centuries. Again, from roughly AD 550 onward or forward in time. Okay, so let's move on now to the next sentence here. It says, for hundreds of years, the ancestral Pueblo people lived on top of the mesa where they farmed beans and corn, but then during the late 1100s, they began building houses on the natural ledges in the canyon walls. Okay, so for a very long time, hundreds of years, these people lived on top of the mesa. They farmed beans and corn. They grew beans and corn in the soil, and they harvested it, and they ate it, and they survived. But then later on in the late 1100s, they started building houses on the natural ledges in the canyon walls below. So, of course, these are the houses, the dwellings they built, and they were built on the natural ledges. The ledge, of course, is the side of something. They kind of built them into a wall, sort of.
Right. Now, this placement was strategic as the walls offered them shelter from bad weather and protection from enemies. So the word placement just means the act of putting something in a particular position. So when we say this placement, we're talking about the place where they decided to build these houses. The fact that they built them on the natural ledges. So this placement was strategic. Strategic means something that is done for a particular purpose. So they didn't choose this placement for no reason, or they just decided to do it quickly. They realized that if they built the houses in these places, then they would be protected from the natural environment, from bad weather, from extreme heat or rain, and also from their enemies. So evidently, they had enemies back then. So the placement of these houses was strategic. It protected them from enemies and bad weather, and the walls offered them shelter from bad weather and protection. So shelter here is a word that means a place where people go to protect themselves from danger or from the elements. Again, elements meaning bad weather.
And placement, of course, refers to where something is or where it's positioned. So if you're opening a company, you might want to consider the placement of the things in your office. Where are you going to put the photocopier? Where are you going to put the desks and stuff like that? You need to worry about the placement. And, of course, strategic, again, is part of a strategy. Strategic is the adjective form of strategy. You need to have a plan. And, of course, shelter is protection. Okay, now, though, here in the next paragraph it says, many of these cliff dwellings have just 1 or 2 rooms. The area also contains some very large and impressive structures. So, yeah, I guess some of the dwellings or the buildings are quite small. They only have 1 or 2 rooms, but there are some very large structures that are very impressive. Again, you look at them and you go, wow, they're breathtaking, they're jaw-dropping.
Yes, and one of these is the Cliff Palace, which contains 150 rooms and 23 kivas, or round underground rooms used to hold ceremonies and meetings. So these places weren't used only to live in as dwellings. They were also used for specific events. They had ceremonies and meetings, and when they had these things, they would hold them in the kivas, which are the rooms dedicated for these events. So here here, we have 150 rooms and 23 kivas that make up the Cliff Palace.
Exactly. So, of course, these people are not around to tell us today exactly what they used these rooms for. So we have specialists and scientists who have looked at them and have come to the conclusion that these rooms were probably used for ceremonies. They were also used for meetings. Hey, what are we going to do about that army to the north? They're trying to attack us. And recent studies have shown that approximately 100 people might have lived in the complex. So again, they're doing research on the dwellings. So some recent studies have shown or concluded that maybe more or less approximately 100 people may have lived in this complex, which of course has lots of rooms and kivas and stuff like that. So if something's approximate, it is a guess. You don't know the exact number. It's more or less this number. And this, of course, is an adverb here. It had approximately 100 people living there.
And today, visitors can see traces of these people in the decorations they left, hand marks above the doors, and animal figures painted onto the walls. So these dwellings weren't bare. They didn't just use them to live. They also wanted to make these places look nice. They wanted to fill them with decorations. Now, a decoration is something that makes a place look nice, look beautiful. For instance, you can hang paintings or have sculptures around your house as decoration so that the place looks more inviting, more comforting. And in the case of these cliff dwellings, there were hand marks left above doors and also animal figures painted on the walls as decoration.
Right, so if they look at those hand marks and those decorations and those animal figures painted on the walls, they could probably have an idea about what life was like back then. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the third part, and we'll discuss it when we're done listening.
In spite of the clear comfort and security offered by these cliff dwellings, the ancestral Pueblo people did not stay there for very long. By the late 1200s, changes in the climate and the resulting struggle for food and resources drove the people living there farther south. The cliff dwellings were abandoned. Hidden for many centuries by the landscape, the dwellings and their historical importance only became known to the wider world in the late 1800s after they were stumbled upon by trappers and cattle ranchers moving through the area. Now under government protection, the dwellings, along with many other ancient structures on top of the mesa, provide an amazing record of how an ancient people lived and once thrived in the often harsh environment of the Southwest.
So we were talking about these cliff dwellings and about the comfort and the security that they offered to the ancestral Pueblo people. However, in spite of the clear comfort and security offered by these cliff dwellings, the ancestral Pueblo people did not stay there for very long. By the late 1200s, changes in the climate and the resulting struggle for food and resources drove the people living there farther south. So, in other words, these people had to abandon their houses, even though these houses were functioning very well for them. But for other reasons, for the fact that there was climate change back then, the weather patterns were affecting their well-being. Maybe they weren't able to grow the food that they needed to live, or it was not raining enough, or it was getting too hot. And this struggle for food and resources forced them to move farther south.
Okay, so they didn't have enough food to eat, and they had crying babies and things like that. What are we going to do? We need to go someplace. We're having poor harvests and stuff like that. The animals are disappearing. We can't hunt them, so we got to leave. We have no choice. And, of course, this process probably took place over many years. So, again, they moved south, and the cliff dwellings were abandoned. If something's abandoned, it's just left behind. And we often use this to describe people leaving a certain area and then no one's there, like an abandoned building, for example. There are quite a few abandoned buildings in cities around the world. They're just not being used. People have left. And also, you could use this term to describe a mother or a father leaving their family. They abandoned their family.
So what happened to these dwellings after the people abandoned them? Well, hidden for many centuries by the landscape, the dwellings and their historical importance only became known to the wider world in the late 1800s after they were stumbled upon by trappers and cattle ranchers moving through the area. So for many years, for around 600 years, these dwellings remained a secret. They remained undiscovered. Nobody knew about them because they were hidden by the landscape. Until around the late 1800s, that's when people stumbled upon these houses. What kind of people? Trappers and cattle ranchers. So trappers are people who hunt wild animals. They trap wild animals. And cattle ranchers are people who work on ranches. A ranch is a large farm in America and also in Canada that raise cows, horses, and sheep. So cattle ranchers and trappers were going about their business, they were working, and then they stumbled upon these dwellings. So when you stumble upon something, you come across it or you find it by accident. You didn't go and intentionally look for it. You just came upon it, you stumbled upon it, and you found it.
So here's the next sentence. It says, now under government protection, the dwellings, along with many other ancient structures on top of the mesa, provide an amazing record of how an ancient people lived and once thrived in the often harsh environment of the Southwest. Okay, so it's under government protection. It's a national park. And, of course, you can learn a lot if you go there. But the people who live there had to experience the harsh environment. If something's harsh, it's severe. It's difficult to get through. You could experience a harsh winter, for example, if you live in Manitoba, Canada, for example. The winters can be very cold, and they have lots of blizzards there.
Right. Or you can say that camels are able to live in the harsh desert because they don't need to drink water very often. So these dwellings are now under government protection, and they are now available for people to go and look at so that people can get an idea of how the ancient Pueblo people once lived, their way of life, and take this journey to the past.
Okay, so once the travel restrictions are lifted, you should be free to travel as much as you want. And do check out Mesa Verde if you happen to be in the state of Colorado. That brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Here comes our Chinese teacher, Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来练习篇章结构的题型。那先来快速浏览4个选项的句子。 A 他说 One of these is the Cliff Palace 逗号 which contains 150 rooms 点点点。可以推测说他前一句可能会提到某一类建筑，可能是很宏伟啊，或是有很多房间之类的建筑，然后接着才会用这一句来介绍说其中一个是 Cliff Palace。 好，再看到 B For hundreds of years, the ancestral Pueblo people lived on top of the mesa 点点点。 好，我们先不管什么是 mesa， 那这边是要注意时间。主要子句呢，它用到过去式动词 lived， 然后句首还有用到 for hundreds of years， 可以推测这个民族啊，这些人他们过去在 mesa 上面住了好几百年。我们看到选项 C Hidden for many centuries by the landscape, the dwellings and their historical importance only became known to the wider world in the late 1800s. 好，这个句子它的主词是 the dwellings， 这些住所，这些住宅。然后呢，直到19世纪末才被外界所知。所以这个时间点你也要特别注意哦。照时间序的话呢，这个句子有可能会出现在文章的后段。好，你再看到选项 D Just beneath the mesa's rim are more than 600 ancient cliff dwellings. 好，在 mesa 边缘下方有超过600座古老的悬崖峭壁住宅。我们可以推测文章可能会先提到 mesa， 然后才接这个句子。好，现在有基本概念，我们来做题目吧。好，第一题，文章一开始他就介绍了一个国家公园，也解释说 mesa 在西班牙文当中意思是桌子，接着提到 mesa 顶端的景色。我们就注意到第一个空格前方他说 An even more amazing sight is hidden from view. 更令人惊叹的景象隐藏在其中。所以选项里面跟 Mesa 有关，而且还称得上是令人惊叹的景象，那就只有选项 D。Just beneath the Mesa's rim are more than 600 ancient cliff dwellings built right into the rock face. 就在 Mesa 的这个边缘下方呢，有600多座古老的峭壁住宅，就建造在岩壁上。好，看到第二题，这个第二空格呢，它前一句有提到说 The ancestral Pueblo people， 以及这个民族大约是从西元550年就住在那里超过700年了。我们就只有一个选项是跟这个民族有关，我们答案要选 B. For hundreds of years, the ancestral Pueblo people lived on top of the mesa where they farmed beans and corn. 好几百年来，古普维部落人住在 Mesa 上方，他们在那里种植豆子和玉米。第三个题目我们看到这个第三个空格，它前一句说啊，虽然这些峭壁住宅很多只有1个或2个房间，但这地区包含一些非常巨大壮观的建筑体，那就可以推测文章接下来是要进一步介绍其中一个巨大壮观的建筑体嘛。那我们选项里面确实有一个是听起来很宏伟的建筑，它有150个房间，同学们猜到吗？所以我们最有可能的答案就是 A. One of these is the Cliff Palace, which contains 150 rooms and 23 kivas, or round underground rooms used to hold ceremonies and meetings. 其中一个就是崖壁宫，它包含150个房间和23个 kivas， 就是用来举行仪式和集会的圆形地下室。好，再来看到第4题，也就是我们最后一个空格出现在结尾段落的第一句，那这就是要对这些悬崖峭壁住宅做总结，我们就只剩下选项 C. Hidden for many centuries by the landscape, the dwellings and their historical importance only became known to the wider world in the late 1800s after they were stumbled upon by trappers and cattle ranchers moving through the area. 这些住宅及其历史重要性几百年来隐身在地景中，直到19世纪末被穿越这一带的捕兽人和牧牛人无意间发现，才为外界所知。好，那么以上是今天的讲解，我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Placement. The placement of the furniture doesn't really matter, so don't spend too long on it. Strategic. The castle was built in a strategic position at the top of the hill. Shelter. The cave offered the travelers shelter from the storm. Decoration. Jesse put up decorations in preparation for the surprise party. Abandon. When all of the gold in the mountain had been mined, the town was abandoned. Harsh. After experiencing a particularly harsh winter, we looked forward to spring. Rim. Laura stirred her coffee and tapped the spoon on the rim of the cup.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoyed reading along with us. I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.